Let's go. Right.
It's been an interesting week for the state of Israel, to say the least. I'll get into the timeline of events that have led to the visuals you see behind you at the beginning of this video. We'll start off though quick with a little interpretation of the events that started all of this from our friend the cockroach, Linda Sarsour. A covert Israeli operation in the Gaza Strip apparently went bad. It left 7 Palestinians dead. They were killed. What are the people of Gaza supposed to do? Roll on their sides? Continue to accept this aggression? An open-air prison, and this siege that has strangled an entire people. When is enough enough? What's wrong with this post? Many things are wrong with the post. First, this is the perception you get from the entire world on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. You get this perception that Israel just comes into the Gaza Strip and attacks innocent Palestinians just for the hell of it. You see how she uses the line, "It left 7 Palestinians dead." Now I'll get into the details of this covert operation a little bit, but what Linda fails to tell you is that these 7 Palestinians that are dead and that were killed are part of the terrorist group Hamas. One of them was a Hamas commander. She gives off the perception that these were just innocent people. This is a terrorist organization hell-bent on the demise of the state of Israel. They don't want it to exist. This is not just some, "Oh, you took my land and I want it back" thing. This is a terrorist organization that believes in Islamic Jihad and believes Israel does not have a right to exist. This is not an attack on Palestinian civilians. Israel did not go in an operation just to kill a bunch of Palestinians. They went in, were spotted by Hamas operatives, and 7 members of Hamas were left dead, rightfully. But like I said, this is the main perspective of the world on this issue, and especially for Palestinians. And why is that? Well, it doesn't help that they voted Hamas into power. So this is how the majority of Palestinians feel. They look at it as you are attacking our government. This terrorist organization who's hell-bent, like I said, on destroying Israel. This is how the people feel. They are just as hateful of Israel as Hamas. They voted them into power. They look at an attack on Hamas as an attack on Palestine. This would be like the Syrian people now saying, "How dare you kill our Syrian people," when they're talking about members of ISIS. This is how backwards these people are on this. Here's a tweet from some guy who explains it rather well. Linda Sarsour is upset that Israel killed 7 Palestinians. Here's Hamas tribute picture of them. Either she is pretending they are civilian or she is mourning terrorists. She doesn't look too good either way. That's a perfect representation of this. These people view Hamas as part of their own people. They're just regular Palestinians. They are the people they voted into power. They are fully behind Hamas in this. And that's the problem here. This is the problem with the entire situation. And this is the thing that everyone in the world somehow fails to see. The world has completely failed on this issue, and it's pathetic. Let's get into this little New York Post article that explains the events of the last week. Gaza militants fired dozens of rockets at southern Israel early Tuesday, killing a man in a strike on a residential building, and warning they would escalate their attacks if Israel continues bombing targets in the Gaza Strip. By the way, the targets they are bombing are Hamas. They're not just civilians. They're not just random buildings that are holding, just random Palestinians. No, these are Hamas-controlled areas and buildings. The cross-border attacks, which were triggered by a botched Israeli undercover raid into Hamas-ruled Gaza over the weekend, marked the most serious escalation since an Israeli-Hamas war in 2014. Now, like I said to you before, I explained that they were were entering a Hamas-controlled area and were spotted and got into it with the Hamas soldiers and killed 7 of them. That's what sparked these rocket launches from Gaza Strip into Israeli territory. International mediators appealed for restraint, hoping to avert another war. The Israeli military said some 400 rockets and mortars have been launched from Gaza since the current round began Monday afternoon, with about 100 of them intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defense system. Israel has hit more than 100 targets, it says, and are linked to militants in Gaza, including a strike that destroyed a TV station of Hamas, which I read somewhere else. It was a propaganda site. The Islamic militant group that rules Gaza. Palestinian officials say at least 3 people, including 2 militants, have been killed. In Israel, at least 20 people have been wounded, several seriously. The armed wing of Hamas threatened to step up its attacks and fire rockets farther north towards the Israeli cities of Ashdod and Beersheba if Israel continued its airstrikes. The spokesman for the Hamas military wing, identified only as Abu Abida, said the deadly attack on the coastal city of Ashkelon showed the city has entered the range of fire as a response to the bombing of buildings in Gaza. He said Ashdod and Beersheba are the next targets if the enemy continues bombing civilian buildings, which they are not bombing civilian buildings. This is a complete lie. School has been cancelled in large parts of southern Israel and local elections postponed because of the threat of further attacks. Over the past few months, the sides have come close to major escalation several times, only to step back in favor of giving chance to a long-term Egyptian-mediated truce. However, the current level of escalation and angry rhetoric, including Hamas warnings about striking deeper inside Israel, might make it more difficult to restore calm. In Jerusalem, the Israeli Security Cabinet began meeting to discuss the next steps, as the United Nations appealed for calm. As for the UN, fuck the UN on this issue. They're fucking backwards on it, always hitting Israel with, I don't know what they call it in the UN, is it sanctions or whatever, I don't know what they say, but they're always dogging Israel for this and never have a problem with what Hamas is doing. It makes me sick. The deadly rocket strike came before dawn in Ashkelon. The Magen David Adom Medical Service said a man in his 40s was found dead under the rubble of a building there. The rocket fire was triggered by a botched Israeli military raid in Gaza on Sunday. Undercover troops, apparently on a reconnaissance mission, were discovered inside Gaza, setting off a battle that left 7 militants, including a Hamas commander and a senior Israeli military officer, dead. Hamas then fired a guided missile that struck a bus from which soldiers had just disembarked, marking an upgrade over its typical inaccurate projectiles. And I did a video a couple of months ago about the March of Return. Started in March. It's a Hamas-inspired protest, quote-unquote, but as you can tell from the name, doesn't sound like peace is in mind. They want to return to inside the Israeli border. They want to take back what they feel is rightfully theirs. Even though this conflict started over, 70, 80 years ago? I'm sure it stems back farther, but let's just say from when Israel became a state. These people here are all dead that started with the conflict. Like, they're not even alive probably anymore. So why on earth do these people feel the need to return to a place that they never lived? But like I said in that video, the march is inspired by Hamas. They tell them to stab Israelis, along with a bunch of other things. They've been sending gasoline balloons into Israel, burning down all this land in parts of Israel. It's been going on for months. It was supposed to be a 6-week protest, by the way. It's been going on, and there's still more calls for it. Here's a tweet I saw recently. The Great March of Return is on schedule for this Friday at the Gaza border, Israel, 11/16/2018. So there's still calls for it. And look at the imagery. Totally looks non-violent. Just, the Palestinian flag in the shape of Israel, stabbing through the Star of David. These protests have not been non-violent. There have been attacks at the border for fucking 6 months now, constantly throwing these gasoline balloons, Molotov cocktails, all types of things. Just a bunch of Palestinian Hamas supporters coming to the border, attacking the IDF at the border, and acting as if these are peaceful protests. This is what you hear. This is the narrative supported around the world. It's so funny. I look up this stuff, March of Return, I look up on Google. All I can come up with is news articles from let's say Al Jazeera, J-Post, Israeli Times, or whatever it's called. These are all like biased sites. They all have their agenda. No one like the New York Times is reporting this. Go look at the list. Go look it up. Go look up March of Return. See what you come up with. Come up with Al Jazeera, J-Post. Like I said, there's no New York Times. There's no Washington Post. None of the big newspapers in America are reporting on this shit. And if you ever do see reporting on it, it's always saying how Israel has attacked these peaceful protesters, ignoring all the footage of Palestinians attacking the border. And then you got scumbags like Linda Sarsour and the new Muslim congresswoman supporting things like this and BDS and all these things that are anti-Israel. These people are playing the victim when all the situation really is their hate and disdain for fucking Israel. They don't want Israel to exist. And that's the bottom line. Linda, you know when enough is enough? Enough is enough when the Palestinian people stop supporting a terrorist organization and decide that's their enemy. Not Israel. When you decide Israel is no longer your enemy and the fucking government of Hamas is, then this can all end. Israel would gladly join the fight if the Palestinian people wanted to team up against their own terrorist-run government. But they don't. They support it. This is the problem. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna go now. Have a good night.